What are some "that was way too close" moments in history? Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1957, a fire in the Sellafield nuclear power station, UK, burned through the HEPA filters and should have contaminated the whole north of England. This is known as the UK's biggest nuclear disaster. The UK was saved by a man named John Cockcroft, who during design insisted that a second set of filters be installed on the top of the exhaust towers. All others ridiculed this idea as expensive and redundant, and the towers became known as Cockcroft's Follies. Folly equals lack of good sense, foolishness. These towers saved the UK, so we're very lucky for his folly. This is the story. https://www.google.com/amp/s/www.bbc.co.uk/news/uk-england-come/2980390.amp. Edit. I should add that while John Cockcroft's Follies saved large portions of the UK, there were also a large number of people who disregarded orders and entered the reactor to try and manually hammer out the stuck uranium rods using scaffold poles to stop the reaction fire. These people took large doses of radiation to stop the disaster. I'm glad that's a decision I'll never have to make. During the siege of Tenochtitlan, the conquistadors built a trebuchet. However, the conquistadors, being an exploratory expedition, had not brought any military engineers with them. So they winged it. Surprisingly, they did build a trebuchet, which fired exactly one shot, directly upwards, which promptly came down and smashed the trebuchet. This event is chronicled in both the journals of the conquistadors present as well as the Aztec records. The Carrington event was massive solar storm that happened in 1859 and directly struck the Earth. Its strength was such that it changed the Earth's climate for a while and infused the very air with so much electricity that telegraph wires around the planet erupted in flames or shocked their operators from feet away. If something like it had happened, or does happen today, it will radically affect civilization by physically destroying or incapacitating most of our modern technology. The circuitry inside cell phones would fuse and the batteries explode. In a split second the internet would stop working, and getting it back online would take a worldwide effort lasting months, maybe years. With the internet would go banking, electrically operated streetlights, all air traffic control functions, most household appliances, AC heaters, the pumps that provide cities with their water supply, and so forth. Any battery-powered device would be disabled. Most trucks, boats, cars, planes and trains would stop functioning, and with them regional and global trade in things like food and fuel. The sheer logistics of trying to get transportation running again would take decades. We are stupendously lucky this happened back when it did, and not in modern times. Chernobyl had a real potential to turn catastrophic. Worst case scenario, most of Ukraine and Belarus wind up heavily irradiated along with parts of Eastern Europe. Apollo 13 in 1970, when an oxygen tank exploded. Astronauts were stranded in space with little hope. It was nearly a disaster, but their teamwork and clever thinking saved them. Chernobyl disaster in 1986, narrowly avoiding the catastrophic meltdown with global consequences. Ogedei Khan, Genghis Khan's third son and heir, died in December of 1241. Prior to his death, a Mongol army under his nephew Batu and a general named Subutai had been given authority to conquer Europe all the way to the Atlantic. Upon news of his death, they turned around and went back to help choose the next great Khan. No further Mongol invasion of Europe ever got beyond the planning stages. Now we can talk about the practical limitations of a steppe army campaigning all the way to the Atlantic successfully. Ignoring Attila the Hun managed to get as far as northern France and northern Italy 7 centuries earlier without proper siege equipment. But the Mongols had already successfully penetrated as far as Poland and Hungary, beating organized European resistance along the way without a lot of difficulty. It doesn't seem incredible to me that a military that could conquer China would have caused incredible devastation in Central and Western Europe. What does European history look like if large parts of it had been either devastated by foreign invaders or even ruled by a Mongol dynasty in the 13th century? We don't know, because one man who most people have never heard of dragged himself to death, and an otherwise victorious, well-led, well-equipped, and motivated army had to go home to decide who to take orders from next. A lot of these are recent. It's weird to think about the times in prehistory where the human population was probably under threat due to a supervolcano or disease or whatever, but we didn't have the knowledge or skills to record any of it. And we survived by the global version of the skin of our teeth. Example: https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/toba_catastrophe_theory. Cuban Missile Crisis. A Soviet sub off the coast of Florida was being depth-charged by a U.S. Navy ship. The U.S. ship was trying to give the command to surface by dropping 3 mines in a row, but in the Soviet Navy, the surfacing command required 4 mines, so they thought they were under attack. They had known they were found and being pursued, and now under attack. All of the requirements to launch their nuclear missile had been met. 2 out of the 3 officers on the Soviet sub inserted and turned their dead man's keys for the launch. The third refused on conscientious grounds, despite being obligated to launch. The world should have ended that day, but didn't, because one man refused to be the one that ended it. If the Toba catastrophe theory is correct, that's probably the closest humanity has ever come to extinction, with the global population being reduced to an estimated 1,000 breeding pairs in the wake of the disaster. The Battle of Remagen. As the Americans closed in on Germany and reached the Rhine in the closing months of WW2, the Germans had successfully blown up every last bridge except for one that was already wired up and hours from demolition. When Brig General William M. Hogue was sent to liberate Remagen, he was shocked to discover the Ludendorff Bridge still intact. It was generally accepted that there would be no bridges left, but Eisenhower generally believed that in the off chance there was a bridge left, it should be captured. He then decided to defy a direct order to link up with Patton further south and send his men on a suicidal charge to capture the bridge. At the very same time, Nazi troops that had fled across the bridge to escape the Allied advance were frantically trying to set off the detonation charges and drop it into the Rhine. While some of the charges actually went off and badly damaged the structure, the bridge still stood because a lucky hit from an Allied artillery shell severed the wires to the detonation charges before they could be triggered. After a valiant effort, the bridge was captured, opening an Allied beachhead into Germany. The first man across, Alexander A. Drabick, spoke about it. While we were running across the bridge, and, man, it may have been only 250 yards, but it seemed like 250 miles to us, I spotted this lieutenant, standing out there completely exposed to the machine gun fire that was pretty heavy. By this time, he was cutting wires and kicking the German demolition charges off the bridge with his feet. Boy, that took plenty of guts. He's the one who saved the bridge and made the whole thing possible. The kind of guy I'd like to know. Asterisk. Incidentally, Sergeant Drabick became the first man to successfully cross the Rhine and capture German territory since the time of Napoleon. With the work of the Army Corps of Engineers, it managed to remain standing for 10 days despite being half collapsed. It survived German mortar attacks, artillery barrages, hundreds of air raids, defended by the single largest AA battery arranged in the entire war, and was nearly obliterated by a German railgun shell that narrowly missed. SS frogmen who tried to float downstream during the night and sabotage the bridge were spotted by special spotlights mounted on tanks. Naval mines sent downstream were caught by nets, and the Nazis even tried to blow it up with V-2 rockets, but missed. After 10 days, the Ludendorff Bridge collapsed on its own, killing several engineers trying to keep it standing, but its capture allowed 6 divisions to cross and establish a beachhead in German territory. and likely shortened the entire war by weeks or even months. The oil well fires in Kuwait almost gave us a taste of what a nuclear winter would be like. Blowing the fires out with a MiG engine and dousing them with a gas turbine turned out to be the heavy hitters in fixing the issue. The incident known as the Norwegian rocket incident in 1995 brought the world to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. Russian early warning radar mistook a Norwegian research rocket for a US nuclear missile. Thankfully, the situation was de-escalated before any catastrophic actions were taken. The British almost colonized the Philippines, as part of the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763, a British expeditionary force led by Admiral Samuel Cornish and General William Draper attacked Manila in 1762 hoping to gain a strategic foothold in the region and establish their dominance over the Pacific trade. The Spanish forces offered little resistance, and after a fierce battle, the British took control of Manila for 2 years. During this period, the British attempted to establish a colonial government and negotiate a permanent settlement with Spain. However, the Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the 7 Years' War, and as a part of peace settlement, the British was forced to return Manila to Spain. Michael Jackson was supposed to be at the World Trade Center on the morning of 9/11, but he overslept. Have you heard about the 1967 solar storm? It's not as famous as some others, but it had the potential to kick off a nuclear war. The storm messed with the U.S. Air Force's radar systems, making them think they were under attack. After WW1, the RMS Olympic was brought back to H&W for a refit and modernization program. During this time they found a massive dent in the plates below the waterline that was determined to be a torpedo hit that had failed to detonate. If the torpedo had detonated, the ensuing disaster would have been on par with the RMS Lusitania or her sister ship RMS Titanic. Cuban Missile Crisis. 2012 Coronal Mass Ejection. The most powerful solar storm in 150 years occurred on July 23, 2012. Scientists claimed that the storm could have knocked out the entire modern world if it had arrived 9 days earlier. Luckily for us, it didn't hit as the Earth was in a different position along its orbit.